I never thought I'd find myself sitting in a nearby cafe at 2 a.m., hands shaking uncontrollably, asking myself, could my own sister really be capable of this? It all happened so fast that I didn't even have time to react before I lost my room in my parents' house, became the subject of ridicule, and suddenly found myself unwelcome in the place I grew up. And all of this because of Ivy, my older sister, and her husband Adrian. At first I thought they were just arrogant, but with each passing day, I discovered more and more chilling evidence that they wanted to take everything from us: the house, my father's money, the ability to live peacefully. But the most terrifying thing came later. They had gotten involved in some sort of semi-mafia financial pyramid and now had to pay back enormous debts. To get out of it, they even went as far as secretly poisoning me. If not to kill me, then at least to disable me for a long time. My story is about how sometimes blood betrays you more than strangers, and how the quiet, unnoticed son who takes care of his father after a stroke can turn out to be the only one who truly saves the whole family. If this ever gets turned into a film, viewers won't believe it all started so ordinarily. 8 months ago, my dad had a stroke, a sudden, terrifying rupture that split our lives into before and after. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. I remember the call vividly, Mom's voice shaking on the other end of the line, barely able to get the words out. It's your father. He collapsed. They think it's a stroke. I flew home that night, barely remembering how I packed. When I reached the hospital, he was barely conscious, half his face slack, his speech slurred into fragments. My dad, once strong, sarcastic, the one who always fixed things, now looked small, fragile, tethered to machines that beeped rhythmically in the cold, sterile room. One side of his body wouldn't respond. He tried to speak, but the words got lost somewhere between his mind and mouth. That was the first time I saw him cry. The doctors called it a moderate ischemic stroke. Not the worst kind, but serious enough to alter everything. He'd need speech therapy, physical rehabilitation, and most importantly, constant supervision. He couldn't be left alone. He'd forget things, get dizzy, or worse, fall. There was a risk of a second stroke, a bigger one. We didn't have much time to make decisions. Mom and I sat in the hallway of the hospital a few days later, eating cold vending machine snacks and trying to plan a new life we never asked for. She was still working her job, not because she loved it, but because we needed the health insurance it provided. If she quit, we'd lose coverage. And I worked remotely, freelance. I had more flexibility, so I volunteered. I was 28, living on my own in a different city, finally building a life that felt like mine. But this was family. I didn't even hesitate. I'll move back, I said. I'll take care of Dad. And I did. We brought him home in a wheelchair with trembling hands and a list of medications long enough to fill a drawer. We had to clear out the downstairs den, he could no longer manage stairs, and turn it into a makeshift bedroom. We installed grab bars, shower chairs, and bought a blood pressure monitor I'd learned to use 3 times a day. I had to help him walk to the bathroom, help him get dressed, help him remember which pills to take, when to rest, how to sit up without overbalancing. The first few weeks were brutal. He couldn't speak in full sentences, which frustrated him to the point of tears. Sometimes he'd just sit there, pointing at something, groaning in frustration because the word was stuck. He hated being helped, hated how helpless he felt. And it hurt, watching someone I loved drift in and out of confusion, unable to do the simplest things without assistance. There were nights I barely slept, listening from the living room for any sounds of him struggling, calling out, falling. Once I found him collapsed beside the bed at 3 a.m., trying to get to the bathroom alone. He was crying softly, trying not to wake anyone. That image will haunt me forever. I adjusted my work schedule around his needs. Zoom calls in the early morning, grocery runs mid-afternoon, medication logs on a clipboard pinned to the fridge. I became his personal assistant, nurse, cook, and emotional buffer. Sometimes he'd scream at me in frustration and a moment later apologize and cry. And still, I stayed, because this was my dad. And somewhere in there, under the bruises, the tears, the broken sentences, he was still him. Mom would come home exhausted from her job, and we'd split dinner duties. On good days, Dad would smile. On bad days, he wouldn't speak at all. But slowly, painfully slowly, there were signs of progress. A new word here, a step without the walker there, and each small victory felt like a miracle. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy but it was right. I moved back home to help him because no one else could, because someone had to, because when you strip away everything, careers, apartments, independence, what really matters is the people you can't bear to lose. And despite how hard it was, I thought we were doing okay, but I had no idea that something else was waiting beneath the surface. That while I was pouring every ounce of myself into keeping this family afloat, someone else was waiting to take advantage of the cracks forming between us. I thought the hardest part was over. I didn't realize this was just the beginning. Everything was going more or less smoothly until Ivy, my older sister, showed up. Officially, to see Dad more often and help out. In reality, she visited sporadically, sometimes staying the night. Then one day, she suddenly declared that she and her husband Adrian wanted to move in with us for a while. Maybe I should have sensed the danger right away. Breakfast. Mom was flipping pancakes, one of the few ways she knew how to make the house feel homey again. Dad sat at the table, flipping through the newspaper, or rather, trying to flip through it, his hand still too weak from the stroke. I was making coffee, already mentally running through the day's to-do list for work. And then they walked in, Ivy and Adrian, like they'd just stepped out of a glossy magazine. She had that flawless hair salon look, and he wore a designer suit, both smiling like they were about to drop exciting news. "Surprise!" Ivy beamed. "We're selling our house and moving in here to be closer to the family," she announced. "We want to help with Dad." Almost immediately, her eyes flicked toward me. "Seb, you work remotely, right? So technically you could go anywhere," Ivy said, in that sugar-sweet tone she used when she was about to bulldoze someone. "We need your room. It's bigger and gets more light." I blinked. I thought she was joking. I laughed half-heartedly, but she wasn't smiling. Adrian chimed in, already setting the stage. "It's not personal, man. It just makes sense. We need a real workspace. You've already been, nesting in the living room anyway." Nesting? I'd been sleeping there for 3 months, making do on a pull-out couch that groaned every time I shifted my weight. I'd worked around their schedules, kept quiet during Ivy's endless Zoom calls, even let them host wine nights without complaining. I'd turned the living room into something semi-functional, sure, but all my real stuff, my books, my files, my guitar, they were still in my old bedroom, my room, and now they were just taking it? I looked to Mom and Dad. Surely they'd say something, but they looked confused, like this had come out of nowhere, like they weren't sure what was being asked or if it had already been agreed upon without them. Ivy stepped in with her classic pitch. "It's really better for everyone," she said brightly. "Seb gets to work from literally anywhere. You love traveling, don't you?" She gave me that performative smile. "This way you're free, and we can finally have some peace and quiet to focus on our project." Adrian added, "It's only fair, man. We're building something real here. It's not like you need a bedroom to answer emails." The words hit me like a slap. I wasn't even being asked. I was being informed. And worse, they made it sound like they were doing me a favor, like I should be grateful for the opportunity to give up more space, more comfort, more of my life. At the time, I didn't realize this was just the tip of the iceberg. I tried to stay calm, thought, maybe they really do want to help with Dad. Yeah, no, they started showing up unannounced. In the middle of the day, late at night. I couldn't even boil broth for Dad without them suddenly appearing and checking if I was feeding him properly, if I wasn't getting too comfortable freeloading in the house. One day, I walked in on Adrian in Dad's office, rummaging through drawers. "I'm just looking for a pen," he said, except right there on the desk were the house deed and some bank documents. And in his eyes, this strange glint, like something had just clicked. Then came the next line. "Does your dad really need this many accounts? Wouldn't it be easier to simplify things? I could take care of it." And all I could think was, is he seriously trying to become my family's financial manager? In the evenings, Dad and I had a routine, light physical therapy to get his right hand moving again. It was slow, delicate work. He'd wince sometimes, but he tried. We both did. Then Ivy would burst into the room like a storm cloud in heels. "Oh, I see you're pretending to do rehab," she'd say with that condescending tilt of her head. "Maybe it's time to call in actual professionals?" The sharpness in her voice, that smug expression like she knew better than both of us. My patience started wearing thin, but I held it in, for Dad. The next morning I woke up groggy and walked outside, only to freeze. By the trash bins were a couple of boxes. Familiar boxes. Inside, my childhood photo albums, old posters, books I'd saved since college. Ivy appeared behind me, completely unfazed. "Oh, we just thought it was time to clear out some of your old junk. I mean, do you really need that stuff? It's not like it's relevant anymore." She said it with a fake little chuckle, like she was doing me a favor. I couldn't even find words. It all came to a head one night. I had just finished helping Dad with his hand exercises before bed. He'd fallen asleep in the armchair, and I was about to help him into his bedroom when Ivy and Adrian appeared in the doorway like two corporate sharks ready to deliver bad news. Ivy didn't waste a second. Sebastian, you need to move out. You're in the way. We have a plan to optimize everything, and honestly, you're just dead weight. You're using up rooms, gas, electricity. It's not fair. You're basically freeloading. Then Adrian chimed in. You've never been ambitious. Mom and Dad always catered to you. That needs to stop. I looked at Dad, still asleep. Peaceful, thank God. I was glad he didn't hear that. Something cracked in me. For your plan, right? I said quietly. Fine, I'll go, just so I don't have to listen to one more word of this crap. And so I packed my suitcase, heart clenched tight, but before I left, I did two things. I installed hidden cameras. It felt like betrayal, even though I knew it wasn't. I kept telling myself this was protection, not paranoia. Still, as I drilled the tiny lens into the corner shelf above the living room curtains, my hands were shaking. Mom stood at the doorway, arms crossed, eyes darting toward the hallway where Ivy and Adrian were talking loudly about paint colors for my old room. She didn't say anything at first, just nodded. Then, quietly, she said, I don't feel safe when you're not here. I don't like how they speak to your father. Or to me. That was all I needed. I planted one in the kitchen, angled just above the spice rack. Another in the hallway by Dad's room. The third was the trickiest, in the corner of the dining room light fixture, pretending to clean it while holding a screwdriver in one hand and balancing on a creaky chair. I felt a sneeze creeping up from all the dust, tried to hold it in, failed, nearly dropped the screwdriver in the process. I caught it. Barely. My heart thudded in my chest as I froze, listening for footsteps. None came. They hadn't heard, or maybe they didn't care. I recorded a quick test feed on my phone and checked the connection. Crystal clear, no sound. I hadn't managed to wire audio yet, but I could see everything. That would be enough, for now. Later that night, I packed a small bag, kissed Mom on the forehead, and drove 10 minutes to a budget hotel off the highway. Beige curtains, flickering hallway lights. Room 117 smelled faintly of bleach and cigarette smoke, but it had Wi-Fi and privacy. I set up my laptop and opened the monitoring app. There they were, moving through my house like they owned it, laughing, drinking wine, rearranging the living room. Ivy had already started boxing up some of Dad's books. Adrian scrolled on his phone, feet on the coffee table like this was just another Airbnb. I watched in silence, and I waited, because something didn't feel right. And I needed proof. What the cameras captured next sent a chill down my spine, so couple cringe moments. Adrian was tossing out Dad's mashed food and the nutritional supplements we used to help him eat more easily. In their place, organic soups and vitamin smoothies in sleek bottles. Mom stood to the side, confused and quiet. Ivy started putting up quotes in the hallway. Success is earned, not inherited. You're either in or you're out. Then came the TikTok videos. They filmed themselves in the living room, calling themselves the new wellness couple, all while my father sat blurred in the background, in a wheelchair. It was a nightmare, but that was just the beginning. Watching the cameras, I started picking up on strange conversations. Ivy and Adrian were constantly talking about money, Dad's office documents, and how they had to make it happen within 2 weeks. I heard them say things like, we don't have time. They'll come if we delay. Debt. That's what it sounded like. I began to suspect they were trying to retitle my parents' house to use it as collateral, or worse, sell it behind our backs. Was this even legal, or were we sliding into outright crime? Then came the smoking gun. I caught this one late-night conversation on tape. Adrian said, those people have been calling for a week. They want their money. You thought Crypto Miracle was going to 5x in a month, and it turned out to be a damn pyramid scheme, Ivy said through tears. I didn't know. They told me it was safe. You convinced me. And now if we don't pay back that $100K, they'll take our house. My friend said it's some semi-mafia group. I just sat there, frozen, staring at the screen. They had poured money into some sketchy investment, lost everything, and now owed dangerous people. And to cover it up, they were trying to use my parents' home as a lifeline. But it got even darker. Another night, I caught a clip I can't forget. Ivy, quietly to Adrian. I only agreed to this because you threatened to tell everyone how I faked those financial reports to get the bonus. You said I'd go to jail. Adrian, relax. Nothing will happen if we clear the debt. I had the leverage. You took the money. Now we both have to play this through. So that was it. Ivy wasn't just toxic. She was blackmailed. At first, maybe she was the victim, manipulated into this by someone who had dirt on her. But now she was fully in, lying, scheming, trying to rewrite documents, belittling me, and turning our family home into a pawnshop ticket. But the worst part? The moment I saw Adrian, on camera, weighing out a strange powder. He poured it into my protein shaker, the one I'd left at the house. Ivy stood beside him, biting her lip. Ivy said, "Are you sure this isn't too much?" Adrian answered quietly, "No, just enough to make him sick. He won't die. We just need him out of the way for a while." I stared at the screen, my heart about to rip through my chest. They had crossed a line. They were now actively trying to hurt me. That very day, I had planned to stop by and pick up a few personal things. The camera caught them in the kitchen, blending up what they called a recovery smoothie. When I arrived, they were all smiles. "Hey, we made you something to boost your energy." I accepted the glass with a fake smile, noticed a strange chemical aftertaste, and pretended to take a sip. Then, with a clumsy laugh, I accidentally spilled half of it. Their eyes were locked on me, sharp, calculating, watching every move. I played dumb. "Oops, a bit salty, but thanks." I did feel a little queasy later, so maybe I got a small dose, but I'm almost certain they didn't have time to spike it fully. That night, I told Mom everything. She was in shock. Dad, of course, didn't know, but I could see his blood pressure rising day by day from the stress in the air. But the real turning point came from the outside. The people Ivy and Adrian owed money to. One afternoon, the front door camera recorded two large men dressed in black standing outside, asking if this was Mr. Adrian's residence and whether he was hiding here. Mom, clearly terrified, lied and said she didn't know where they were. One of the men said something that chilled me to the bone. "Tell him his time's up. If we don't see a payment by the end of the week, we'll have to use other methods." Other methods? This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was criminal. My parents were being dragged into some kind of shady financial trap, and our home had become collateral in a game we never agreed to play. That was the moment I contacted a lawyer. I explained everything, the threats, the financial pressure, and my suspicion that Ivy and Adrian were preparing to forge documents to use the house for a loan or even sell it outright. My father, after the stroke, couldn't reliably sign his name, and they could easily help him, or worse, forge it entirely. The lawyer and I agreed to file a request to place a legal hold on any property-related transactions. Nothing could be done without my or Mom's direct consent. Then I sat down with my parents. I suggested giving me official power of attorney, just to make sure no shady business could go through behind their backs. Mom hesitated at first. She wanted to believe Ivy still had some decency left. But after everything, she looked at me through tears and whispered, "You're the only one I trust now." So we made a plan. I organized a family dinner. I invited Ivy and Adrian under the pretense that I'd finally come around, that I understood everything now, that I wanted to join forces with them, maybe even leave the house entirely. We just needed to discuss the details. They bought it. That evening, they showed up. Mom and Dad were sitting in the living room. I stayed close, calm, but just behind the wall, my lawyer, disguised as an old family friend, quietly recording everything on his phone. He also had the paperwork we needed, just in case. And then Ivy walked into the room, smiling like a cat who thinks it already caught the mouse. "Seb, you've finally come to your senses?" Adrian followed behind, holding a folder under his arm. Probably the folder, the one with the documents they planned to push through. What they didn't know was, the trap had just been set. I leaned forward, trying to keep my voice calm, almost casual. "All right then, go ahead, bring out the papers. Let's see exactly what you want Dad to sign." They placed the folder on the table. Roughly 200 pages, some labeled Power of Attorney, Refinancing Agreement, Home Equity Mortgage. Everything had my parents' names and personal details, and a line at the bottom for a signature or fingerprint due to Dad's impaired motor function. And then, like a light cracking through the fog, Dad spoke. His voice was soft, broken, but clear enough. Why? What is all this for?" Ivy didn't even flinch. She launched into her script. "Dad, it's for your own good. We're saving the house from potential debt. We just need to move some money around. Some of it will go into your account." Adrian jumped in with a rehearsed smile. "We'll get better medicine for you, maybe even a modern wheelchair." That was my cue. I stood up, reached for the tiny hidden camera I'd been carrying, held it in full view, and said, "Right, but maybe explain why you're hiding the fact that you're deep in debt to some shady collectors, all because of a pyramid scheme that collapsed. And now you want to use this house as collateral to pay back the $100,000 you owe?" Ivy froze, her face draining of color, and then Mom calmly opened her laptop. Pressed play. The living room filled with audio. A recording of Ivy and Adrian whispering late at night about crypto miracle, loan sharks, and the deadline that was closing in. Ivy stood paralyzed. Adrian instinctively grabbed for the folder, clutching it like it might somehow save them, but it was too late. You had no right to record this. You twisted everything, Ivy snapped, her voice shaking. I didn't say anything. I just reached into my bag and pulled out a second recording, the one where they talked about the powder they put in my drink. Mom gasped. Her voice cracked as she asked, Did you actually put something in my son's drink?" She was sobbing. Dad looked at them, his hands trembling on the armrest. He couldn't speak much, but the tears welling up in his eyes said everything. He was holding back a flood of pain and fury. Ivy panicked. "It's not what you think. You misunderstood. We just wanted him out of the way." And then, from the hallway, my lawyer stepped forward, calm, composed, holding a folder in one hand and his phone in the other. "My name is James. I'm their attorney. Legal protections are already in place. The bank has been notified. No signatures will be accepted without a formal medical evaluation. What you attempted was illegal." Adrian exploded. He lunged for the folder, trying to snatch the documents back and run. I blocked the door. He shoved me hard. "We weren't giving up. We just wanted to save ourselves from the criminals," he yelled, out of control. And then the doorbell rang. According to the plan, I thought it might be the police I'd called just in case. But no, it was them. Two bulky men in black, the same ones from the front porch footage. "We're here for Adrian," one said. "He needs to come out. Today's the deadline." Ivy started crying again, panicked. "Please, just give us more time. We're finalizing the paperwork." The collectors looked around, saw the cameras, the lawyer, my mom clutching her chest, half the room filled with documents and chaos. One of them raised an eyebrow and said, "If you don't owe us anything, we'll leave, but he," pointing straight at Adrian, "can explain everything to us outside." The room fell into complete disorder. Adrian grabbed his bag and made a break for the door. The men stepped forward. "No running, friend. You owe someone important." I turned to Ivy, grabbed her wrist gently but firmly. "Sis, you were really going to sign us all away to this?" She broke. Falling to the floor, she confessed through sobs. "It started small. I forged some reports at my last job for a bonus. Adrian found out and used it against me. He made me invest Dad's money, and then I got in too deep. I was scared he'd make it worse. I didn't know how to stop." The tension finally began to unwind. Not disappear, just shift. It was still sitting in my gut, but at least now it had a shape. The police arrived with sirens off but hands near their belts, calm, controlled. I met them outside with a shaking voice and a printed stack of screenshots from the cameras. They asked questions. I gave them everything. Inside, chaos unfolded. The collectors tried to act innocent at first, all smug shrugs and forced smiles. But when one officer asked for identification and ran their plates, the air shifted. One of them, a wiry guy with a fading neck tattoo, muttered, "This is ridiculous, we're just here to talk." The other one, already sweating, backed toward the door. He clearly didn't want to tangle with law enforcement. As they were escorted out, the tattooed one threw one last glance at me and hissed under his breath, "Don't worry, we'll get what we're owed." That's when my stomach flipped again. Inside the house, Adrian was fuming, red-faced, pacing, denying everything. "You think I drugged him? You're all insane. This is a setup." The officer remained calm. "Sir, we have you on camera handling his drink before he blacked out. You're also listed in 2 active debt investigations, and your ID flagged inconsistencies. You'll need to come with us." That's when it cracked. Ivy started sobbing. Not quiet tears, but loud, desperate crying that filled the whole hallway. She sank to the floor, mascara streaking down her cheeks, hands clawing at her face. "Please," she sobbed. "You don't understand. He said we were fixing everything. I didn't know. No one said anything. The silence made it worse. One of the officers crouched beside her. "Ma'am, you're not being arrested, but we'll need you to stay available. There are open investigations." "I didn't touch his drink," she sobbed. "I didn't steal anything. I thought he loved me." It was so loud, so raw. It should have made me feel sorry for her, but I didn't, because I'd seen the footage. I'd heard what she said behind my back, and now the performance was for someone else. Adrian was let out in handcuffs. Ivy technically was free to go, but she wasn't free. Not from the charges that might come, not from the debt, not from the fear. She turned to me, eyes wet and empty. "Seb, I didn't want it to end like this. Please believe me." Dad, voice hoarse, barely audible, said just one thing. "You betrayed your family." And in that moment, I saw something break inside her. She couldn't even meet his eyes because she knew, no matter what happened next, he would never trust her again.